Hi, I'm PC Peri. Welcome to part 2 of the Busiversary, Flying Focus Video Collective's annual look back at our weekly series. This year we're celebrating our 25th anniversary. We started in 1991 during the so-called Gulf War, which we more appropriately called the massacre in the Middle East.
And I'm Dan Handelman. Flying Focus creates shows covering issues you won't see on mainstream TV, such as peace, police accountability, animal rights, economic, environmental, and social justice. Our tagline is using video as a tool for social change, voicing the voiceless. We've created hundreds of programs covering speakers, forums, protests, and difficult-to-find information. This show marks 25 years since November 18, 1991, when the weekly Flying Focus video bus premiered.
While corporate TV chases the largest audience for sponsorship dollars, we're focused on the content more than slick production values. If you want to join us, we'll help you unlock your potential. Learn to make TV. Grab a notation device now and capture this contact information.
Our phone numbers are 503-321-5051 and 503-239-7456.
And our email is ffvc@flyingfocus.org. Contact us if you would like to be a volunteer with or a supporter of Flying Focus. Now let's get back to the producers introducing clips from shows we produced between November 2015 and October 2016.
So now I'm going to talk about more foreign affairs shows that I produced. The first one features Jeff Halper of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, speaking in Portland in February. In his talk, he made connections between the Israeli occupation, militarism, police, and Middle East peace more broadly. This show was taped by John Pacheco with PC Coaching. Halper had recently written a book on the war against the people, talking about how Israel has made a global business of exporting the tactics it uses to suppress Palestinians, and in doing so has made itself nearly immune to criticism. Here you'll see Halper, an Israeli Jew, talking about Israel and its apartheid state, an analysis that got former President Jimmy Carter into hot water a few years ago.
Today, the reality is an apartheid state. In other words, Israel eliminated the two-state solution, but in doing so, it created one state in this area. There's no difference, really, between Palestinians living in Hebron or Nablus and Palestinians living inside Israel. There's a certain legal citizenship Palestinians in Israel have, but it doesn't mean very much. As a matter of fact, except for attacks like in Gaza, last year in Gaza, Israel demolished 18,000 homes in Operation Cast Lead. In years where there's not a military invasion, in fact, Israel demolishes more homes of Palestinians who are citizens of Israel than it does in the occupied territory. So the actual rights and status of Israeli Palestinian citizens are this much better than those of the occupied territory. There's only one effective government. I mean, don't tell me the Palestinian Authority is a genuine government with authority. There's only obviously one army. By any measure, this is already one country. But it's an apartheid state. As a matter of fact, I would argue it's worse than apartheid. It's apartheid in the sense that has two major elements of apartheid. One is when one population separates itself from the others. That's what apart means. Apartheid means separateness in Afrikaans. Then that population, that dominant population, imposes a permanent and institutionalized regime of domination.
My next show features yet another event I helped organize, a march and rally that marked 14 years of the U.S. war in Afghanistan in October 2015. It's now November 2016, so that war has now been going on over 15 years. The footage includes portions that were live streamed by Cakes, who helped us with another show last year, and on-the-street video by PC. There were about half a dozen speakers, lots of chanting and music, including the group Love Bomb Go-Go, who you'll see at the end of these clips. The theme of the event was Call Out for Justice End the Wars, with a deliberate effort to connect global peace issues to the police accountability movement and other domestic policies. You'll hear Adrian Kaboué of Black Lives Matter Portland making those connections, and Ari Lavali, an Iraq War veteran, addressing white privilege.
Murder, torture, we say no! Close down Guantanamo! Murder, torture, we say no! Close down Guantanamo! Murder, torture, we say no!
We see this in the way police are empowered to slaughter civilians in the streets with an arsenal of military-grade weapons with no consequences. We see this in the way black bodies are locked up in private prisons and detention centers for violations of selectively enforced racist laws and forced to produce consumer goods like jeans and flags for slave wages. We see this in the way the most marginalized citizens of our country are fined out of their homes en masse. And we see this in the way countries that we destroyed and bombed beyond recognition share the same symptoms of U.S. intervention.
We, with a lot of privilege, who don't walk in worlds where, especially white folks like us, like myself, you know, we face the violence of capitalism and the violence of this system in our society and in our bones. It's ingrained within us. And I think we really need to stand in solidarity with people who don't have the privilege to resist by marching.
My last show was one I taped at the Dell Greenfield Peace Writing Contest finalist presentation hosted by Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility. The contest is open to high schoolers all over the Portland area and asked this time to describe how fighting climate change could lead to a more peaceful world. In these clips, you'll hear 2 of the 3 prize winners talking about climate change and how it impacts their generation. The keynote speaker was Dahr Jamail, a fiercely independent journalist who was one of the only unembedded Americans to cover the Iraq War. His main focus now is climate change. Much of his talk, he described the disappearance of parts of nature we take for granted, such as glaciers, ice caps, and the Great Barrier Reef. In the clip, you'll hear him describe how the U.S. military contributes to our global crisis.
Almost everyone that I know and am friends with and go to school with believe that climate change is a real thing, so that's awesome. And but like we live in Portland, and so you have to sort of consider that into it. And you know, there's kids that don't. I've met kids that don't, but I think the overwhelming majority of kids our age would definitely say yes, it's a thing. And you know, our schools teach it to us. And like I take AP Environmental Science in my school, and it's like we have like 200 seniors that are taking that course or something like that. And it's not, I mean, it's science to us. It's not a guessing game or politics. People, especially my age, think that there really is nothing they can do. And I think other than voting, there's really precious little that we can't do that adults can. And I think that it's important this is everyone's issue, but it's our issue. We're the people who are going to be growing up in 2050 when all these statistics sort of seem to be built around the year 2050, and all these things are sort of, by this year, will be in a completely different planet. And I'll be 52 then, so I'll just sort of be in the middle of my life. And I think that it's important for us to recognize that this is our planet, this is our future, and the rest of our lives are going to be like this.
The U.S. military is the single largest emitter of CO2 emissions on the planet, bigger than any other country on the planet. And then you follow that up with the Pentagon budget, including all the black budget and stuff that they don't have to list, basically, is over $1 trillion a year. We could take single-digit percent, like as in less than 10%, like something between 5 and 7% of the Pentagon budget for 2 years, and outfit the entire country on renewables, to run completely on renewables.
Hi, I'm Alan Evans, and I've been a volunteer with Flying Focus for a while now. This last year I worked on 2 projects with other Flying Focus volunteers. The first one was about renewable energy in Oregon. Renewable is doable, you know. The name of the show, What is Community Solar Power? On February 9th of this year at Tabor Space in Portland, Dan Orzek of the Oregon Clean Power Coalition and James Valdez of Northwest Sustainable Energy for Economic Development talked about how to develop community solar projects. Through legislation, the Clean Power Cooperation Program was created to encourage and allow people to come together and invest in clean power in their communities. James and Dan talked about how various these projects can be and included some success stories. They looked at what are the benefits of community solar and what are the difficulties. They also covered site planning, financing, and tax credits. Their talk was recorded by PC Peri and Dan Handelman, assisted with program editing. So here are some clips from the show.
What is community solar? It's simply putting solar panels on someone else's roof. So why would you want to do that? Well, why not put them on your own roof? You may not own your own roof. If you rent, if you live in an apartment building, you may not be able to put solar panels on your roof because it doesn't belong to you. Why the legislature created renewable energy cooperatives was to allow people to come together to invest in solar in their community, on other buildings besides their own roof. So how does it work? Got someone who lives in Oregon, has to be an Oregon resident, who joins the co-op. Can't see very well, but you can see that person smiling. That's because they're going to be able to take their money and put it into something in their community, see the results. It doesn't necessarily have to be an individual. Only individuals can be members of the co-op, but other organizations could invest as well. So these people put up the money, and the co-op owns the project. Well, I really can't see that very well, can we? The co-op owns the solar panels, owns the project, and sells the power to the church, the school, the hospital, the library, and then uses that money that that organization pays the co-op to pay back its members. And then when the members have been paid for, when the project has been paid off, the co-op doesn't need the solar panels anymore, so the host organization, the church, the school, gets the panels and then has free electricity. A key factor in solar today in the US is that there are tax credits worth about half the cost of a solar project. So if you don't take advantage of those, it'll cost you twice as much to put up solar.
The second show I worked on this year was Erin Brockovich, Environmental Organizing in Portland. In early 2016, the Forest Service found alarmingly high amounts of toxic metals in the environment in some parts of East Portland. On April 2nd, the Eastside Portland Air Coalition brought Erin Brockovich, well-known environmental crusader and consumer advocate, to Revolution Hall to speak and advise Portlanders on how to deal with their toxic metals problem. Her talk was recorded by new Flying Focus volunteer John Pacheco, assisted by PC Peri. Assistance in editing and final production was done by Dan Handelman. And now here are some clips from that show.
We're not going to give up. We're not going to go away. We're going to find out our facts and our information no matter which way that goes. And only then will you be able to move forward into a sustainable future for yourself and be armed with information to protect yourself and your health. And we are here to help you through that investigation. I know you know how to find me, and anybody can email me at any time, but it's going to be about starting to gather information, and what will make a difference is you. How involved you will be, how proactive you will be about following through, having stick-to-itiveness, working with your community, going to your local members, and standing up and saying, hell no, we're just not going to take this anymore. And it is happening everywhere. So as frustrated as I get, there is still hope. There is absolutely something changing in society right now, right today. And it is us moving back to things that matter the most, that sustains every single one of us. And that is our water, our air, and our health. When you get united and you have a situation with a huge superfund and you start showing up with 300, 400, 500, you're going to get their ear. It takes numbers of people. It does. I mean, this is how we've successfully done it every single time. In a city council situation or within a city, how you fight them is with numbers, and come armed with your information, and don't give up, because they're going to bank on the fact that you will. Arm yourself with information. That's exactly what I did. So when I went out and I talked to people, I could say, see here, we're visual. We can hear a lot, but when we can touch it and we can see it and we can make a determination for ourselves, wow.
This year we recorded the Professor Guy McPherson speaking about the end of the world as we know it.
Yeah, he's an ecobiologist, an evolutionist, and he's talking about that we've come to the end of our time. We've had lots of warnings, and he has compiled all the evidence and the research, and says we don't have much time left, maybe 10 or 15 years.
And that's in the area of ecology?
Yeah, the global warming and all of that.
And why did you find it so disturbing?
Because I thought we were going to have more than 10 years, but it looks like there isn't hope for that.
Civilization is a heat engine. Think about that. If you're on it with solar panels and wave power and wind turbines, it's still a heat engine. Only turning off the heat engine that is civilization prevents runaway climate change. Turning off the heat engine leads to up to a 3 degrees Celsius global average temperature rise almost immediately. 3 degrees is a big deal, as we'll see. When I was teaching college at the University of Arizona, some of my students hadn't been born yet when Noel Brown pointed out that governments have a 10-year window of opportunity to solve the greenhouse effect before it goes beyond human control. Well, it looks like the statement made more than 27 years ago indicates that we had 10 years, 17 years ago. Time's up. In response, here we are. Loss of habitat will cause human extinction because we're human animals. And like other animals, we need habitat to survive. That habitat is comprised mostly of those things I mentioned earlier that we monetize: food, water, and air. And without them, like every other species on the planet, we go extinct. It's relatively simple, actually. We're animals, we need habitat to survive. We're destroying every other species on the planet. You think that's not going to affect us? But we're starting to see accumulating evidence in the referee journal literature that we can't go on like this. But at some point, these livestock did not die because it was hot. They did not die because it was dry. The rancher had stock tanks filled with water that they could drink out of. They died because they didn't have food. And as it turns out, I get really hungry and cranky when I don't have food. And at some point, we're going to look like this without food. And we're headed there now.
All right, we're going to talk about ALEC now, ALEC, and that's a program that I taped and Barb edited. What does that mean, Barb?
ALEC? ALEC is the American Legislative Exchange Council, and it's legislators who get together with corporate lobbyists.
We recorded the ALEC panel discussion at the Clinton Street Theater. It was conducted by journalists, educators, and members of the activist community.
So if you want to know why we're in the dire straits we're in as far as climate, you can take a look at this clip.
The American Legislative Exchange Council. This is a corporate lobbying group that brings together lobbyists and politicians to vote on model bills behind closed doors as equals without any public input that often benefit the corporation's bottom line. These model bills are then introduced in state legislatures across the country, including here in Oregon.
With regard to climate change, despite ALEC's efforts to promote climate change denial among U.S. politicians, and despite the fact that there is global consensus at this point that the Earth is warming because of human activity. And that's according to like respected bodies like the National Academy of Science, the American Medical Association, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, along with 97% of climate scientists all agreeing on this point. ALEC continues to draft legislation and has a major platform of climate denial. At their last session in 2014, in their annual meeting in Dallas, Texas, ALEC legislators were repeatedly told, quote, there is no scientific consensus on the human role in climate change, quote. At another session during the same conference, legislators heard that, quote, the idea that there is a scientific consensus on climate change does not hold up. In attendance at that event were more than 2,000 legislators that took that message back to their jurisdictions, including former House Speaker John Boehner. So legislators in 7 states, including Oregon, last year drew on a proposal drafted by ALEC to advance legislation withdrawing their states from regional agreements aimed at fighting global warming.
At Annie Bloom's bookstore, I taped Paul Engler speaking about his ways and means of organizing that he knows about how to do on the streets. Tell me more.
Well, Paul Engler is a longtime activist and organizer, and he wrote a book with his brother Mark about how to change the world through peaceful uprising. In this clip, he talks about how nonviolent uprising is actually way more effective than violence. And it's quite inspiring.
The ways and means.
The ways and means. Much more uplifting than a lot of our programs.
Civil resistance is the academic field that studies mass protest movements and studies how these movements overthrow dictators. And Erica Chenoweth got together all these violent and nonviolent movements, and she put them in this great database to study all the aspects of the organizations and how these movements mobilize people and what makes them successful versus what makes them unsuccessful. One thing she realized is nonviolent movements are twice as effective as violent movements and are becoming more and more effective than the violent alternatives for a variety of different reasons. That's one thing she proved. But the second thing she proved is this amazing thing, which she says that movements always win when you have 2 things. It always wins if you have passive support for the majority, from the majority people. So everyone say it. Passive support from the majority. And 3.5% of the population actively participating in your movement. 3.5% of the population. Boom! Well, what does that, I mean, like 3.5% is about 11 million people in the United States of America. That's a lot of people.
That's all you need.
That's all you need. But it sounds crazy. She says every single time a popular movement in another country hit that critical mass of 11 million people, sustained participation for even a month or 2 months, the dictator would fall. Every single time. Sometimes it was much less. It was 2%. Sometimes it was, But if you hit that critical mass, she's never had an example where it didn't work. And if you see what I'm talking about is, our book is talking about the craft of social movements, of mass protests. How do we engineer, and trigger events is really key to that. Because these movements are targeting the public, creating actions that can hit that critical mass.
That brings us to the end of the 25th Busiversary. Thanks for joining us.
We disseminate this information to get people to take action, to make the world a better place. Knowledge is not power until you do something positive about it.
People who'd like to volunteer with us or support us in any way, call 503-239-7456 or 503-321-5051 or write ffvc@flyingfocus.org. Our show plays weekly on cable TV, but you can also see clips and some full episodes streaming on the web at flyingfocus.org.
Tune in or set your video recorder each week in the same time slot for the Flying Focus Video Bus. Thanks for helping us reach our quarter-century mark. See you next time.